Okay, I think we'll start. I'll keep admitting people as they come in, but for now, thank you so much, everybody, for joining Panoramic Associates Change and Transformation Meetup. So the aim of the session today is just to share best practice, challenges and trends within local authority change and transformation. My name is Jasmine Morton and I'm a consultant at Panoramic Associates, and I specialise in representing candidates and helping clients source those candidates within local change and transformation. And I also work very closely with my colleague Iffy Jarrett, who specialises in the interim side of change and transformation in local authorities. So we have a fantastic lineup that I'm really excited to introduce you all to, and there'll be plenty of chances to ask questions at the end of the session. Please, by all means, keep typing all your questions into the chat. We'll try and get to as many as possible, but if we do find that we run out of time today, I will have your contact details. I'll share mine. Please get in contact and I will ask the questions directly and get back to you as well. So the format of the meetup for tonight is we'll have 3 speakers. We'll have Nathan Pearce, Karen Thorpe-Reid and Teresa Itabor, and they all have their own excellent specialisms that they'll be chatting about. So as just a little bit of etiquette, if you do join, just make sure that your microphone's on mute whilst they talk, just so that we don't hear the dog in the background or anything like that. And again, ask as many questions as possible and enjoy. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our first speaker, Nathan Pearce. And I'll allow him to talk about what he does.
Brilliant. Hi, can you hear me and see me, Jasmine?
I can hear and I can see you.
Perfect. Thank you very much for inviting me along to talk today. I'm delighted to be able to share my thoughts with you on change and transformation in local authorities. My name is Nathan Pearce. I've got 2 roles actually in the Greater London Authority. I'm head of the Smart London team, where we oversee all things kind of smart city, digital infrastructure on behalf of the Chief Digital Officer and the Mayor of London. And I'm also the Programme Director for Sharing Cities, which is a large European programme. So I've got a bit of an insight on what's happening at a London level, and also what's happening in some of our European partners as well. And I'm going to tell you a bit about what I do, and then I'm going to tell you a bit about some of my thoughts about where we are now, particularly post-COVID. So can I change the slides on this, Jasmine, or are you going to do it? You're doing it. Perfect. So in terms of Sharing Cities, this is a big programme that's now coming towards an end. It's Horizon 2020 funded programme, which is led by the Greater London Authority, but covers the cities of Lisbon, Milan, Bordeaux, Warsaw and Burgas in Bulgaria. So some really exciting and interesting cities who are part of this change programme. And what we've been funded, 25 million from the European Commission to do, is test a whole range of different types of what were at the time innovative technologies. As I said, the programme 6 years and not so innovative anymore, but what were innovative technologies in the area of low carbon, green tech and clean tech. So I won't go through in detail exactly what we did. You can see a lot of what we've done there on the slide, but we've implemented things like converting the whole of Lisbon's municipal fleet from diesel power cars to electric cars. In Greenwich, we've deployed thousands of smart lampposts with all different types of sensors, which have really helped us to start transform how we deliver public services. From big scale things like data platform and using data to redesign the services that we deliver, down to small things like parking sensors, which allow Greenwich to properly manage where the coaches of tourists come and where they park those coaches. And in Milan, we did quite a lot in terms of engaging with citizens, and also mobility islands, places where you can drive an electric car to, charge it up, get on an electric bike, and then get onto the metro network and so on and so forth. So, and then we've looked at the role of data in all of this as well. So linking together all of these Internet of Things technologies, how do we extract data that allows city planners to improve the way that they both react to challenges and also how they can plan for the future more effectively. This program has all been about testing these technologies and seeing what works. And it's also been about seeing how can we actually use these technologies to bring investment into local government. And we, to date, have already triggered around about 270 million of additional investment in our cities off the back of the investment we received. So, can you go one slide back, please, Jasmine? Perfect. So that's kind of the big, bulky projects that I lead on in the Greater London Authority for London. But with my head of the Smart London team hat on, we also do quite a lot of different things at a London level, which are all driven by the Chief Digital Officer's Smarter London Together roadmap, which is basically our smart city strategy for London. And out of that, we've done a number of things like set up London Office of Technology and Innovation, LOTI, which brings together over 19 boroughs now to look at joint and collaborative projects in the area of digital innovation and technology. 5G Commission, looking at the role of 5G in public sector. Talk London, which is all about citizen engagement. Civic Innovation Challenge, where we fund businesses to respond to the challenges that we face in local government. And the London Data Store, which was the world's first public sector designed data platform, which is now in its 10th year. So next slide, please, Jasmine. So that was a very brief, I did a presentation today at Islington Design Centre, where I spent 45 minutes talking about the work we do in our team. So you just got a very, very short appraisal of what it is that we do in the Smart London team. But the next two slides and my last thoughts on this are going to share with you some of my ideas around different ways of working and also what the pandemic means. So the Sharing Cities programme was built on an agile management system. So effectively you had the Universal Programme Management Office based in the GLA, and then you had project teams in each of those cities that I mentioned earlier. So I've got a lot of experience in managing teams in a matrix management environment in different, not even different areas or departments in different countries. And I would say my experience has told me over the last 5 years that it works, but it's really not easy. I think one of the big challenges that you have with a kind of agile management approach is really about making sure that what people tell you is what's actually happening on the ground. And that's always a bit of a challenge. So we try to as much make sure that we visit things and see things on the ground. But what that has done is that has really prepared us for the world that we now find ourselves in post-COVID. So lots of my colleagues in the Greater London Authority haven't experienced that agile management approach, haven't experienced using Teams, and well, I was using Skype to have lots of team meetings. So we're really being prepared for the way things have changed over the last 18 months and this hybrid approach, because we've already been doing it. And one thing I would say from our experience is, you know, if you're in a local authority or you advise local authority, don't go selling off desk space just yet. My feeling is that whilst people quite like the hybrid approach to begin with, it wears thin after a while, and actually being located near to people is far more important than what people understand. And the best way to manage things in a kind of remote working environment is to go through an outcomes-based approach. So you can't micromanage people on a day-to-day basis, even if you wanted to. You have to say, this is the outcome I want you to achieve, and now I'm going to manage you and your team based on that outcome. So typically in the Sharing Cities programme, it would be, you need to install 50 bikes. That's what I'm now going to be managing you on. Another thing that we did when we designed our hybrid approach is to co-create a team charter. That's really about including your staff in how you actually create your approach to a hybrid and remote working. And the biggest problem, which I'm sure you're all aware of, are the younger members of the team. So I think this is the biggest challenge we've seen, not just in my Sharing Cities programme, but across the GLA, particularly where you have new starters who are really young and unable to learn from other members of the team and unable to see how the team works, both from a practical and technical point of view, but also from a kind of cultural point of view. You know, what is the right way of dealing with stakeholders? What is the right way of engaging with people? And one way that's a really hard nut to crack, by the way, but one way we've done that is to actually schedule in social events to make sure that we've got much more face-to-face time and really trying to encourage people back into the office. Next slide, please, Jasmine. So last slide, I'm going to just share some thoughts about where I think innovation in government is going. And I think one of the biggest areas that we've seen, particularly post-pandemic, is the role of data in solving some of the trickier debates that there are in local government. So a really good example, particularly if you live in London, you'll be aware of the low traffic neighbourhoods and the fights that they have caused, if you've ever been on any of your local Facebook groups and seen this. And what we've managed to do is actually, where people have said on both sides of the arguments, you know, traffic is now doing X because of a low traffic neighbourhood, or people are now acting in this way, we can now deploy sensors at very, very low cost, put them up on the ends of these streets and tell you exactly what people are doing. You don't have to guess and you don't have to assume. We know exactly how many people have walked down that street, cycled down that street, driven down that street, who would have driven down that street. So that's been a really interesting aspect to it. We're also really looking now at the role of technology and innovation in meeting those 2030 carbon climate targets. And this is now about marginal gains. The big things are wind power and solar. That's going to be what really drives us towards 2030. But to get that last 20 or 30%, you need to do a lot around behaviour change. And the role that technology and digital plays in that is going to be really, really crucial. And it's about increasing efficiency by doing things in a more efficient way. A good example is, you know, we have teams of people driving around boroughs looking for broken lampposts. Well, actually using smart technology, you can tell when that lamppost is broken without having to get someone to drive around. This needs connectivity, needs really good fibre. It needs to make sure that people are included, that there isn't digital technology and innovation for some at the expense of others. It needs public, private and academic partnerships, and it really needs data sharing. Data sharing is what we are going to be hammering home over this next year between both boroughs, between local authorities, between NHS, public sector, government, housing associations. We have seen the power of sharing, data sharing over the last 2 years through COVID. We've actually seen that it's not as hard as what people previously told us, because all of a sudden we created data sharing agreements in a matter of days rather than months. So we really know that it's something we want to push. We need to make sure that when we do it, there is trust from the public, both in terms of privacy and also concerns people have. And I think that's really important. So the last thing I'll leave you on is we have an organisation called the UK Smart Cities Group, which is specifically for council local authority officers who are interested in some of the things that I've mentioned here in the world of smart cities. So if you're a city and you're interested in joining that, you're not part of it already, I'll be happy to hear from you. Jasmine, that's it from me.
That was excellent. Thank you so much. I know that was quite a lot to fit in about 10 minutes or so. So I really appreciate that. And hopefully there's plenty of questions, and those questions we can think about asking towards the end. We do have Nathan's details there, but again, I'll come back to this towards the end, everybody, and we can do a bit of networking, so don't worry too much. So on to our next excellent speaker. I'd like to introduce you to the wonderful Karen Thorpe-Reid, talking about reimagining your operations model. So without further ado, go ahead, Karen.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I'm Karen Thorpe-Reid. I am Managing Director of Premier Change Consulting. We're a small boutique change and transformation organisation. We kind of work in a slightly different way to some of the big four, in the sense that we come in and we do some very targeted pieces of work for you to help you to kind of really bring either sort of vision what you need to do, or bring that vision to life and help to kind of shape it in quite a quick way. So we do that in a series of design groups to get you where you need to get to, as well as also working with you to implement some of these changes. So Jasmine, can you go on to the next slide for me? So I was just going to probably build a little bit on what Nathan was saying, and probably just very much support what he's saying around intelligence. Intelligence is absolutely at the heart of everything when we're doing our new operating models. Before, you would kind of just create your operating model based on your existing structure. And now what we encourage local authorities to do, and other businesses, is to actually understand both your demographics, your customers, the way they interact with you, the way they want to interact with you, and then to design your services based on that intelligence. And that intelligence comes from a variety of different sort of forums that it can come through and different networks. And it helps you to think about what are those critical things that we need to do as an organization. The other side of that is about life events. So we call, sort of life event interventions, where we start to think about some key aspects of the life cycle. And for each local authority, it's different based on your demographics and also your spend in specific areas. So we know a lot of high spends in social care. And we start to think about, I'll give you an example, where we know that within our borough or our city that there are 10, 20, 30,000 who are going to retire in the next sort of year or two. What are you putting in place to prevent them from actually contacting you? We want to be able to push them out into other parts of the community. How are you using those best resources? How are you starting to actually push out your campaigns to support that so that you can actually manage that demand? A lot of local authorities are struggling at the moment because of the amount of demand and pressure that is being put on. So you've got the budgetary and financial pressures, as well as the increase potentially in people contacting. So we start to look at things like life events to help us to do that. And that, again, is sort of support by that kind of strength based working as well. Can you go on to the next slide for me, Jasmine, please? Here we start to think about some of those key components when you are starting to develop your target operating model. And one of the key things, and as we start to look at using much more digitalization, we think about ensuring that we kind of streamline those processes and minimize our waste. And that is really about that sort of adopting a lean approach to the way that we deliver those services. The talk of digitalization is huge, and that's global. And as Nathan was alluding to before, it's just about kind of looking at the way that your customer is experiencing their service with you. You start to design your services based on those demographics and the way that they might want to interact or engage with you. And this is not about making sure that we don't have the skilled people doing the specialist roles. It's about being able to focus more on your frontline services than some of the administrative or double counting, duplication, and it's reducing some of those efforts as we go through things. Using that intelligent process automation, really good sort of AI out there at the moment. I've been working with a couple of organizations who are really starting to embrace that. And if you look at, the big places like Amazon, etc., who are really using that in a good way to allow them to streamline how they move around. And a lot of local authorities are starting to look at what does good look like in that respect for us. The other thing that sort of sits alongside that is really around your channel shift and your ability to proactively manage that. A lot of organizations talk about, well, we're going to adopt this new piece of technology and we need people to move into to using it in a different way in order for us to make some savings. However, the challenge is, how are you proactively managing that? How are you actually managing both the demand and moving people onto those new disciplines and those new platforms? How are you making it in a way that you are either changing policies or sending out really good campaigns to draw people into those various different channels? So that's also an important one. I spoke about intelligence because intelligence is absolutely at the heart of everything that you should be doing to facilitate the decisions that you're making. A lot of our clients and our customers and the way that they have traditionally interacted with the council has been very much a hand-holding way, and a lot of the people that are interacting that need to be, we kind of think about the vulnerable We want to make sure that we can still provide those one-to-one and face-to-face opportunities. But the others, we want to kind of think about, well, how can we use our technology? How can we use things like Zoom and Teams to, you know, to speak to customers? How can we start to think about looking at maintenance and repair stuff? How can we use our IVRs, things like visual IVRs, which are really quite useful in terms of being able to manage that demand and also reducing the amount of visits that you have to make face to face. So some really key things that you have to sort of be considering in that space. And I guess the other thing is about outsourcing, and I've sort of been around at local authorities now for the best part of 20 years, and I've seen insourcing, outsourcing, and people often say, well, outsourcing doesn't work, but it's about the quality of your contract, but also how you're managing your contract. Are you managing that proactively in a way that allows the outsourcer to be held to account? So that's also a very important component in terms of the way that you do things. I'm just going to talk a little bit about life events. If we go on to the next slide, in terms of how you kind of identify them. So, you know, we came up with a series of kind of high level criteria and some questions that you might ask yourselves as local authorities in terms of whether or not it's the right things to invest in. So once you've got the intelligence, it's to understand, you know, around improving citizens' welfare. What are some of the key things that make a difference, or that you would want to ask some of those key component questions to? So are there existing services that meet those requirements? Can a future need for council services be predicted from this life event? So we've set out a series of questions so that it then allows you to make some decisions about what good looks like around that space and whether or not it's cost saving, etc. So just wanted to kind of share with you a little bit around how we kind of shape those. Can you move on to the next slide for me, please, Jasmine? This is quite an important one for me. I talk about balancing your maturity and your vision. I've worked with a lot of organisations, both public and private, in which there sometimes is a clear vision, other places they're not. But within, sometimes there's a great vision for an organisation. However, they haven't taken into consideration the maturity of their organisation. I've seen a lot of maturity assessments done, but it hasn't taken into consideration the behavioural change that's required, the cultural change of the organisation, where they are to get them, the amount of effort that's required, the amount of engagement to get people a lot bought into the vision, and also proactively acting. So, you know, they're quite early on in that maturity. So I think something about the realism within local authorities for me is something that's really important. Even, yes, you know, you've got the pressures of the targets and the savings. However, it's about that incremental move and that step change that needs to be made. So just kind of thinking about what are those key things that we need to do, and what's the realism around that. So a lot of the times when we come into local authorities, we do a balance of both. We help to create that initial vision. We work with that based on the maturity assessments that we do, that look at both the technical sides of the changes that need to happen, as well as also the behavioural and cultural aspects. We use that then as a balance to then work with the local authority to decide which areas do we think we're going to get the most value out of, and we can put the most effort to get the returns. If you'd like to move to the last slide for me, please. And on this last slide, really, it's just kind of, so what next? So I think one of the key things in terms of, as you whether or not as you design operating models and you think about how you're going to implement them, or you've got a transformation program, is to kind of assess your organization's change capability. Do you have the right people in the right roles, or are you building the capability to enable them to yourself to be self-sufficient? One of the things we do as an organization is we aren't there to hold your hand all the way through. We will be there to start you off. We'll be there to build the capability. We'll be there to do the knowledge transfer, and also as a critical friend for you to check in with us. But we try very much to make sure that we leave our organisation in which they are resilient and they're able to continue the work. So it's not a case of them not having all of those capabilities within the organisation. So when you're thinking about your operating model, start with a clear understanding of what the customer's value is, and use it to decide where to focus and what to de-emphasize. Make sure you're linking your customer value to the operational drivers that underpin it, and make sure then you think about the customer and using the digital tools to streamline those. Embed Agile and cross-functional ways of working. And Agile, for me, isn't just about being able to work in a hybrid or remote way, but it is really thinking about breaking down some of those really old silos that we have, in which you're able to really work across and almost stand up as project teams to deliver specific things. And something that works really, really well. I did some work with Department of International Trade recently, in which we looked at a model that would allow them to do that, where they could stand up at certain times to be able to deliver projects across the organization, where people understood what the role would be, but it allowed them to be really agile. It's great from a career development perspective, great to build in resilience across the organization as well. So a really key thing in terms of doing that. And then we've got around guiding, you need to be guided by your priorities. Simplify and streamline. That's the key things. I always say that it doesn't take a genius to make something complex. If we can simplify things, it makes things a lot easier. And then, of course, just tackle the most important customer journeys one by one, and support your effort with your your operational change, and that would support that as well. So that's it. That's all I had today, Jasmine.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I was scribbling down loads of notes there. So I am looking forward to seeing some of the questions that stem from that. Lots of really logical, really nicely broken down. So I really appreciate that, Karen. And again, everybody, I keep repeating throughout the session, any questions, we will have a Q&A, but feel free to start popping them in the chat now if anything has arisen from Karen and Nathan's talks so far. And we will get to them. So, last but certainly not least, I'm really thrilled to introduce you to Teresa Itabor, who'll be talking about best practice challenges and trends facing local authorities in the UK. Oh, and you're on mute, Teresa. Sorry.
Do you know, I thought I promised myself I wasn't going to fall for that, and I just did.
Okay, everyone does it. Right,
okay.
I'll leave you to it.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me, Jasmine. And Karen, that was a very, very useful presentation. I wish I had you with us when we were delivering the last transformation I just did for Barking and Dagenham Council. Can we have the first slide, please, Jasmine? Next slide, please. Thank you. So my name is Teresa Itabor. I was Transformation Director at Barking and Dagenham Trading Partnership, which is a company that was spun out of the borough of Barking and Dagenham. I was Transformation Director from 2018 to August 2021, so last month. And prior to that, I was Growth and Commercialization Program Manager, again at Barking and Dagenham from 2016 to 2018. So my background really has been basically 20 years of delivering change and transformation across a number of local authorities. But today I just want to be a bit more granular and talk about the transformation program that I've just completed at Barking over the last 3 years, and which is a very, very good example of a major change. I want to discuss the challenges we faced and put it in context with the current trends in local government, and then draw some conclusions around that would inform best practice. Next slide, please, Karen. Jasmine, thank you. So, oh, goodness. Oh, that's it. So back in 2015, Barking and Dagenham embarked on what they called Ambition 2020, which was a modernization program. And from this, the decision, rather than outsourcing, the vision was to set up this local authority trading company to deliver on 2 failing service departments that they had, which was the repairs and maintenance, which we all know is a very challenging service, and catering and cleaning services for schools. I think the difference between what the vision was, and what was happening in current local authorities, was that they wanted this company to be completely separate and independent of the council. They didn't want the council making decisions on behalf of this company. They didn't want any representation at all from the council in this company. They just wanted to be a major shareholder. And so the non-executive directors, the board, everybody was recruited from the private sector as well as the CEO. The repairs and maintenance service was delivering over to 20,000 households within Barking and Dagenham. And all the council did at the time was set 4 objectives for this new company that was set up. It was to go out there and compete for business and deliver all the profits and dividends back to the council, improve customer satisfaction and overall service delivery for the company, and also to have a social value, a social purpose, and deliver employment opportunities for residents within the borough. And finally, to increase the skills of the transferred workforce that were coming in from the council into the company. So about 1,000 council staff were 2P'd into this new company. Next slide, please, Jasmine. So immediately you could see the challenges that we faced. We had 1,000 staff 2P'd in, we had 2 failing services brought together, badged as a private company. And so there was no experience within the council. So the first challenge we had, and this was why I think it would have been very, very useful to have you there, Karen, was the clarity of vision. So the senior leadership within the organization, as well as us within the company that was being set up, had a clear vision of what needed to be delivered. We had the clarity, we knew what the council wanted, we knew we wanted to be independent, but it actually wasn't sufficiently communicated or embedded within the council. So the rest of the council didn't know what the purpose of the company was. We knew what we were doing, well, the rest of the council didn't. So what happened was that there was this part of the council that was treating the company as one of the departments within the council, and making decisions on behalf of the council, and the council trying to break away, making independent decisions and trying to be commercial. So there was that friction from the beginning, and this was what I was brought into to actually help to try and deliver and make this work. And also with this new company, these 2 services required the catering company, for example, all of their services, all of their processes were manual. They'd never, ever used the system of any kind before. These 2 services hadn't been looked at for the past 20 years. So this was all very new to them. So part of the transformation included setting up organizational structures, looking at service models, business processes, IT systems. The company didn't have a finance team, an HR team. All of these things were part of setting up the company that we had to go and do. So there was huge challenges for us when we started putting this company together. And bearing in mind, we had profits and targets to deliver to the council in the first year of operation. Next slide, please. So the huge thing that we had was the culture, because both services had different culture anyway. The repairs and maintenance guys, they had their own way of working, they had their own way of visualizing things, and the catering and cleaning guys had their own culture, the way they worked. So we had to bring this together. We had to make sure that we introduced also a culture that we wanted to be what the company stood for. We wanted them to adopt a commercial approach. And it was 3 years of hard work, I wouldn't lie. 3 years of straight just trying to deliver this. The shareholder had massive expectations in the first year. There's a sort of I don't want to call it forgetfulness, but once the 2 services were brought into the company, everybody forgot that they were failing services. Everybody wanted to see the profits. Everybody wanted to see the increased customer satisfaction. Or within a year, everybody wanted to see the change in culture. So it was managing expectations as well. That was a huge challenge. The good news from this is that we did deliver the transformation. We did deliver in the first year £2 million profit to the council, and in the second year, 5 million to the council. Another big challenge that we underestimated and we quickly came over was the fact that we needed more external support and more expertise than we anticipated in the first place. So all of these challenges in 3 years, we had to sort of overcome as we went along, because although this was planned, until you actually go into it, and in the way that the council wanting us to compete externally with established companies that were delivering similar services, it was a massive challenge for us. Next slide, please. So it was a very good example of transformation initiatives in local government, although it was very different in the sense that it was very independent and the CEO and everybody else was from the private sector. And it was a really major step trying to sort of introduce a huge change in culture for staff that hadn't sort of experienced any change over the past 20 years, and bringing them in and trying to bring the workforce along, trying to get their buy-in, and at the same time engaging with the council and with the major shareholder to bring them along the journey with us. It's very, very different. And I know that this is what most local authorities are going towards at the moment. Transformation nowadays is macro, is huge. It's not the small service-led business process re-engineering that we used to do back in the day. These are massive things. But I think one of the big lessons learned for us is that we have to make sure that we plan this properly. We have to manage expectations, and we have to be realistic in what we're trying to deliver. The pandemic also has changed expectations. What we realized in the middle of this transformation, after moving everybody to brand new headquarters, making sure everybody had a desk, everything was nice and shiny, the pandemic hit and everybody left. And everybody started working from home. And what we've also realized during this period is that our customers got used to transactions online. They started, they got used to not coming to the council offices for their services. So now we are looking at putting more services online. This is the way that the customers are, these are the expectations now. But we do need to make sure that we look at our demographic and we know that we have the sort of residents that would adapt very quickly to this. So these are the trends that we've noticed right now. Can I have the next slide, please, Jasmine? Thank you. So these are the trends that we know that are needed right now, and all of these things, all of the lessons we've learned from this. I'm going very fast. I'm not going into the detail, but all of the lessons and challenges we faced during the implementation of this independent private company with Barking and Dagenham is that the important things and the best practice for us is that you're going nowhere if the clarity or vision is not communicated across the piece, both to the council and to the company. And it has to be consistent, and it has to keep, because when new people come in and old people go off, the message becomes, less, it becomes less impactful. So the communication has to just be consistent. The time scale for delivery must be realistic. The expectations, we must manage expectations. These are huge changes. So expecting huge profits in the first year, the second year, these things need to be managed, and we need to make sure that we have the experts in there and the resources that are put aside is enough to cover the transformation that is expected. We also shouldn't expect staff with their day jobs, doing day jobs, to be a huge part of the transformation. Yes, contribution is useful. They're subject matter experts, but we shouldn't expect them to deliver this huge transformation because they also have other expectations on them in terms of their day jobs. Don't reinvent the wheel. We have to learn from others. It's always harder than we think, but I'm pleased to say that we did deliver huge profits the first 2 years, but it was a tough 3 years. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again for managing to fit that in the space of 10 minutes.
I know, I sort of rushed it, sorry.
No, it is not rushed at all. It was really good, and the chat is going crazy. I sound a bit like I'm on X Factor there. So we have quite a lot of questions to try and get through. So wow. If I can get Nathan, Karen, and Teresa, all three of you on camera, and off mute. I'll try and get through as many of these questions as possible in the chat. And again, I just repeat, if there's anything that we can't get to today, I will leave some details at the end to contact me, and then I can ask the questions directly and get the answers to you. So enough of hearing me talking. Let's start. So this one is from Caroline Brom, and it's directed at Nathan, actually. Do you have to be a city to join smart cities?
Yeah, well, it depends what she's referring to. So the UK Smart Cities group that I mentioned at the end is specifically for cities. So it's a kind of open forum where city officers, council officers typically can have a good old moan about things they bought, how it works, whether it does work, how much do you pay for it, etc., etc. So we've really tried to keep both kind of government and commercial organisations out of that group, create a kind of safe space, as it were, for people to have those conversations. So in that respect, that is purely for cities. But the other work that I do and the work that we do around kind of smart city engagement and the projects that we do across London, we welcome everybody. Indeed, we have a kind of a targeted approach at not only dealing with the demand side, so the boroughs and housing associations and developers, but also really trying to engage with suppliers of technology, people who work in the smart city space. So that's a much more open kind of invitation to get in touch.
Cool, thank you so much. And the next question from Victor Roman. Again, so because these have been posted during the talks, they'll probably go chronologically to each of you, but I believe this is more directed at Nathan as well. So how can we use AI in statutory complex services such as social care or safeguarding, and what are the limitations on that?
I mean, how long have you got? I mean, that is a big question with big ramifications and problems. Look, I'll tell you firstly, it's already being used. AI is being used in social care platforms, being used in social care contracts, and there's been a bit of controversy around it as well. It's used a lot more in America than it is here, but there is still the use of it, and it can be relatively benign. So you could have AI, or maybe not always AI, sometimes algorithms, which determine which routes care workers will take. What's the most optimal way of visiting, going out on visits? What's the optimal kind of care packages? So it is already in use. It certainly could be used more. Again, mainly in the areas of optimization and prevention. They're using AI to actually understand, track people's behaviors, particularly people around, say, dementia is a good one. You know, are people doing what they do every day? Do they need a visit? Can the algorithm, the AI, tell you that that person needs to be visited? So there's quite a lot of different applications you can use it. But the problems you got, and I won't go into the detail on this call, you know, are around, as this person Victor noted, both safeguarding and unconscious bias, and the problems that you have with unconscious bias in AI. So some of the things that we're looking at in London around that is we've been working closely with London Office Technology and Innovation to say, okay, well, are we happy with how this is being used in London for Londoners? Do we need to create a separate charter? And what kind of safeguards do we need to put in place? So we've recently released the Emerging Technology Charter, and that mentions London's approach to AI and our approach to privacy as well. And we're also looking at this, particularly from a cybersecurity point of view, with central government at the moment. That is a very short answer of what is a very complicated subject.
Thank you. Yeah, good on you for trying to package that all up. I'd like to dig more into it, but we've got quite a few. So I've got a question here from Gareth Wall, which is actually, it's given to all three of you, but I'm going to start off with Karen. And he says, most of these change programs sound like they need a lot of investment. Coming from a second tier council here in Hertfordshire, could I ask you to expand on practical examples from where multi-tier local authorities have successfully partnered on major change programs? So Karen, I know you've worked with, I can't even count on my fingers,
yeah.
how many. So
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I think it does come down to the leadership. That tends to be the first thing, and having an agreed vision that people can commit to, and visible leadership. So that's one. And I think in terms of the practicalities around it, it is kind of thinking about, when you look across multiple organisations, and you think about when Westminster and Hammersmith, etc., came together, and Kensington, when you look at those sort of local authorities, the parts that were most successful are when you identified almost like for like in terms of the way services have been delivered. So that gives you kind of almost a baseline platform in which you can then re-engineer how you're going to work in the future. So it is really about kind of almost doing your pilot, in which you test a process or a customer journey, whatever the case may be, in order for you to see whether or not, one, you're the right fit for each other, because that's also really important, because cultural differences can be a huge barrier to you actually working collaboratively with another local authority. Such differences in maturity. So I think the practicalities really are, one, understanding the cultural differences, two, making sure you do a testing of either a service process, whatever the case may be, so that you can kind of work from there, setting up some your internal sort of OLAs and SLAs, so service level agreements and operating level agreements, so that they work really collaboratively. Investment is a big thing. I would say in terms of change, we say the budget should be at least 20% should be spent on change management to deliver your transformation. And for every pound that you invest in change management, they say there's around about £6.50 in terms of return on investment.
Oh, nice bit of stats there. Thank you, Karen. I actually hadn't heard that one, so that's really good to know. So my next question is to Teresa, from Anna Banerjee, and he has, or should I say they have said all of what your trading company did must have needed investment. Where did that come from? And, which leads on quite nicely from Karen's answer, was there a measure of the proportion of profits from new contracts rather than back into the local government client? So it's a little bit in two parts there, but it starts with, where did you get your investment for your trading partnership?
So thank you. So initially, when this company was set up, it was actually a loan from the council. So the council set aside X amount to say, this is a loan that we expect you to pay back when you're up and running. So that was where we got the money for. In terms of the profits or the dividends we had to pay back to the council, when the trading company was set up, and when the CEO was brought in from the private sector, the council, within the contract that was set up, we had X amount dividends to deliver in X year. So they, I think it was, they did take into account that it was a startup. They did take into account that the service wasn't the best, and we had to do a lot of investment in both staff and the quality of service that we're delivering, and we needed to engage more with the residents and the customers. All of that was taken into account. So the initial initial profit or dividends was something around 800,000 to £1 million in the first year. But actually we delivered 2 million in the first year, which came as a shock, to a nice surprise and a nice shock to the council. We didn't think we could do it either, but so they did set a target for each year on what would be delivered, and that money was used to sort of was used in other areas of the council, like social care, the areas that needed more money. That was what the money was generated towards. The profit was generated towards. I don't know if that answers the questions.
So like I said, these questions, it's when Nathan said, how long is a piece of
we didn't in the first year, we didn't think that we were good enough to go out there and compete commercially. We just thought we'll be literally slaughtered if we went out there because we were not ready for it. We spent the first year actually trying to get match fit, but we generated quite a lot of money from the capital program work that was being done at the time.
Okay. And were all the profits given back to Barking and Dagenham?
Yes, because we had to put a rationale for what we felt we needed to keep behind to improve the company, or to invest back in the company, or to invest back in getting the staff to where we want to get them to. So we did need to have, we had a shareholder panel where we used to go quarterly to argue the case, to say, well, we need this money for X amount. Otherwise, we give the whole dividends back to the council.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So, we've got so many questions. Great. So I'm going to try and prioritize the ones that are a little bit more general, so we can throw them out to all three of you. So Jay Paramanathan has said, how do you build stakeholder confidence that innovative change can be successfully delivered such that they can actively commit to it? And the reason I throw that question out there is because I get this a lot. So I'm really curious to know what your thoughts are. That is open to the floor. Who would like to go first on that one?
I don't mind going first on that one. That's always an interesting one. So I think one of the things that we tend to do as part of our sort of visioning is we set up first kind of the very clear vision of what good looks like for the organization. But you start off with the, well, why are we doing this? And the why we're doing this, whether or not that's from a positive lens or a negative lens. So it could be positive in the sense that, we are a high performing local authority and we want to maintain that, or it can be that, we haven't been performing greatly and we want to, we want to build on that. And then you've got kind of a very clear vision of the future. So that has to be, can't be woolly, it just has to be very clear, and see how people can then connect to that. And then you have to be really precise about the key steps to delivering that vision. And that doesn't mean, well, we're going to move from Mac to Dell. It is just about the key things that will enable you to be successful in terms of delivering that. So that's the first step in terms of doing things. The other thing then is around, in terms of getting that stakeholder confidence, is making that case for change. What is the case for change? And for each of your stakeholders, you need to understand what the hook is for them. We've just been working with a local authority in which for each of their chief officers, we did the pre-meets with them. We understood what were their specific challenges. We took the time to understand how engaged they were with the program and what work was needed to put in place to bring them to a level in which they could support it. And it's really key that you do that. If you understand what the hook is for each of them, then that will make a difference. So it's getting into that key ones, then identifying your influencers. So a lot of times us as change and transformational experts and professionals who come into organizations, we don't have credibility in your organization. So for us, we need to then use some key influencers within the organization to do that. We're happy to kind of work in the background, help you to create the case for change, help to drive some of those conversations, but ultimately it has to be about you being able to champion that. So that would be my response on there. Sure, Nathan or Sarah has their.
Yeah, I mean, I would take, agree with a lot of that, and a couple of things I would add. Also from the kind of approach that we take in the DNA, which is slightly different. I think it is about showing success. It's about being able to, we do a lot of what we call user-centered design. So we try and get the kind of end user, which I think is the outcome you're talking about, Karen, and what is it we're actually trying to work towards, and design the service around them. And really importantly, the projects, particularly the innovative projects that we've deployed both in London and in the European project that work the best, were the ones where all of the end users were involved from the beginning. And this isn't like a really kind of process heavy, like you've got to run everything by everyone all the time. but it was a kind of like, we're about to go and put 300 electric bikes in your area. You'll be amazed by the amount of people that don't talk to the maintenance crew or the people who've got to actually collect the data, or, you know, the people who are actually going to use these things at the end. It is surprising how little people do that sometimes. So involving them right in the beginning from the design, finding out if there's easier ways of doing things. Another thing that we found, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend all the time, but it was a bit of an eye-opener for us, was involving local universities and academic partners in change or innovative programs where appropriate, where relevant, and particularly in the digital technology and digital space. Actually, we found that they were really up for getting involved and didn't necessarily want money for it. And B, some of the kind of intellectual rigor they added to our projects. And we're so lucky in London, we've got UCL and Imperial and you know, major universities. So I know that was an advantage. But that was something that surprised us in how helpful and useful it actually was. So that's what I would add.
I would like to add one thing to that. So I agree with what Nathan and Karen have said. I think for me, the leadership is very important. So actually getting everything on board and getting that clarity of vision and making the change for the case for change and getting the end users involved and all of that, all great. But I think one of the big challenges for me in this big transformation program is ensuring that halfway through your program or before the completion of your program, that the leadership don't lose interest or move on to the next big thing. Because that is when things start to unravel a little bit. Because when you do have everybody on board, when you have leadership on board and you have that high profile people that would help push this vision and make it real for you, when you've got them there, it's all great, but ensure you have them till the end. Because if something else happens and there's the new big thing, something else comes on board and they move on, then you find it a lot more difficult to get to that end product.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. It's 6:58. Should we squeeze in one more question? How are you all feeling about that?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
As long as everyone else is okay too.
Yes,
right.
That's fine.
We'll squeeze in one more. I will take a copy of all the other questions. Oh, don't think the dogs are happy about it. We'll squeeze in one more. I'll take the other questions and I'll email you any others that have popped up. But we've got another one addressed to all of you from Adam. And Adam says, for a large local authority, and I would even argue maybe even mid-sized ones here, but where would you say is the most appropriate place for an agile transformation team to be led from in governance terms, if not a separate trading organisation? So
yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, that there is actually, I would say that there isn't a right answer to this. I think it is based on the organisation. And I've been into several organisations where, you know, having to design the operating model and think about where might this be located. And I've seen it located, believe it or not, within IT. I've seen it located within HR. I've seen it located in corporate services. So there is a variety of different places, and it depends, Adam, really much on the actual governance of your organisation in terms of what you've got. I also did. I set up sort of the governance over at Network Rail, where we did everything from the portfolio management and thinking about where would that change team sit, and that actually sat under finance at one stage. So I think it does depend on the size of your organisation. However, to give it some level of independence, I think that the transformation director should absolutely be sitting at the top table. Rather than being just within a team, and that would be one of the things that I would absolutely recommend. If you can have a transformation director who can sit around there, that way that's reporting directly into your chief exec, that makes, I have seen that in terms of my experience, made a huge difference as to perception of others, because quite a lot of times people will think if it sits within corporate services that the agenda of the corporate services director is the one that's leading. If it sits, in finance, exactly that. So if you've got them sitting on the board who is reporting directly into the chief exec, that can help to make a huge difference. But that's just my experience. Not sure what my colleagues, Nathan, Teresa, your experience around that.
No, I completely agree with you, Karen. I sat at the top table when we were putting this trading partnership together, and it made a lot of difference. It really did, and it gave me a lot of influence over how we delivered that the transformation itself. And I was able, just sitting at the top table, you have access to all the other different areas within the organization that you can actually engage with the staff there and make sure that the change rolls over right through the whole organization. In terms of where the team sits, I also agree with you. There isn't a right answer to that. It depends on that particular organization and the governance within the organization. But I think it's very important for the transformation director to be at the top table, because it does help a lot. And you see a lot of the changes from day one before it rolls back down to cascades that back down to staff. You can see the difference of opinion and the way the discussions are going at the top table, and what the decisions are being made that would influence the transformation you're trying to deliver. So you're seeing it firsthand, and you can actually have your mitigation against that, or actually, even if it's explaining to them, oh, actually, you've got the wrong end of the stick here. This is what we're doing, or this is what we're trying to do. It's really important that happens. So yes, I agree.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with any of that. I would just add that if you're looking at trying to lead a change program that includes multiple organisations, so we do a lot kind of across multiple boroughs in the GLA at a London level, and including like NHS and potentially private sector partners as well, that political leadership suddenly becomes really important. The closer we are aligned to the mayor, the more likely we're going to get something done. Basically, I think is the best way of putting it. So I think sometimes that is necessarily when you're looking at it inside one local authority. Sometimes it's not. And exactly as the others said, it depends on the organisation structure, the topic, what it is that you're actually trying to achieve. Is it controversial? Do the benefits sit elsewhere, or are they all within one department? If all the benefits are in one department, fine, just get that department to look at it. But quite often change programs, the benefits cross a number of different areas, and that's what makes them a bit more complicated. So yeah, completely agree. And there's a political role in it as well sometimes.
Lovely. And yeah, I'm my 2 cents just to finish up as well. No, I agree with you on that as well. I think I ran a change program in my old organization, and we had a distributed leadership model, and it essentially fell apart until we changed it, because we had a designated decision maker at the top, then making the change program and cascading through. So I do agree with you. I think the closer you are to, as all of you actually alluded to earlier, to the influences in the organization, and the more that person actually is there to make decisions, the better. And it does also make it easier from sort of a matrix management point of view, because there's someone big and scary that they can all listen to, sort of thing, and report back to. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Right, we have so many questions, but I'm very hyper aware that it is 7:04, and I've already overrun by 4 minutes. End it there. As I've reassured multiple times, I have saved the chat. I will get back to each and every one of you who has asked questions in the chat that I haven't been able to ask our wonderful presenters during this time. Just an absolutely massive thank you, Nathan, Karen, and Teresa. Your talks are so informative. I love the different.
I'm trying to wash them up. Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, I thought someone else said something. Yeah, your talks are really informative and really useful, and hopefully you can see you had very high engagement from that as well, because there were so many questions asked. So I do really appreciate having you all there. If there's anybody here that doesn't have my details or Iffy's details, they're there. Please send me an ad on LinkedIn. Any other further questions that you wanted to ask, pop them in a chat to me. And as I said, I will get back to each and every one of you. And thank you so much and have a wonderful night, everybody. Thanks,
Bye.
Nathan.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
I'll leave the
Bye-bye.
screen up for a couple of minutes, everybody. I'll take myself off camera and put myself on mute, but I will leave my screen up if you wanted to get any of the details.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.